Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, Breaking Shan, Ep.4. I am Zishan Bakhtiar, and today I'm sitting with Mr. Toland, one of our TV production teacher here at Atlantic City High School. And today I'll be interviewing him and asking him a few great questions about his TV production and about his background. So let's get right into it because he does an amazing job and we want to find out even more. All right. Hello, Mr. Toland. How are you feeling today?
Doing great, Zishan.
That's great. So I have some questions set it up for you, and I want to, get to know you more because this field is amazing that you have here, and I think it's pretty great. So let's start off with just knowing you a little. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself and how long you've been in education?
So I was born and raised in Ventnor, New Jersey. Went to school at Atlantic City High School and then to the University of Maryland. Had a 30-year run as a sportscaster on TV. After my TV career was over, had to look for the next chapter of my life and landed back in my old high school, Atlantic City High School, and I'm now completing my 8th year of teaching.
8th year, wow, that's amazing. So before education, you was a news reporter, as you said?
Sportscaster. Never really did the news. It was always about sports. So I was a sports anchor and a sports reporter. Started off in a small market in Florence, South Carolina. I was there for 12 years.
Wow.
Then I went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Fox station there. I was there for only 2 years before I got the job in Washington, D.C. I was 10 years at the ABC station, then 5 years as a freelancer at the All Sports Network there. So 15 years altogether.
15 years as a sports news reporter and anchor.
In Washington, D.C.
Oh, in Washington.
My entire career, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
If you take the 12 years in South Carolina, the 2 years in Pittsburgh, it's 15 to 16 years in D.C. That's 30 years I was on TV.
Wow. How was the transition from each station to each different state, city, location?
Yeah, much different. So when you first start out in this business, a lot of times you start off in a small market and you have to work your way up. So living in South Carolina was something completely new for me, a different culture. It's quite different there, but the people there embraced me. I loved it so much and probably would have stayed there the rest of my life if I didn't have this driving ambition to make it to a major market. That, I couldn't lie to myself as much as I enjoyed the people and I loved the area and I was like, oh, I could have a great life here.
Yeah.
Inside of me, there was something that said, Greg, what are you here for? You were here to be in a major market. And I couldn't lose sight of that. And so that's why I left to go to Pittsburgh, because I needed that stepping stone to get me to the major market. And luckily, my dreams came true in Washington, D.C.
That's amazing. So you covered mostly sports. So did you meet great players and stuff like that?
Oh, absolutely. I've interviewed Michael Jordan. I've interviewed LeBron James. I've interviewed Steph Curry. I've interviewed Tiger Woods. I've interviewed so many professional athletes at the NFL level, Major League Baseball, NBA, professional golf, the PGA. I was very, very fortunate. It's what I wanted to do since I was a little kid. It was everything I hoped for and more, and I felt like I maximized my talent. I never was one of those who thought, oh, I should have achieved more. No, a lot of people were better than me. I felt I maximized my talent. I feel very fortunate to have gotten to a major market like DC.
Wow. Did you, on camera or off camera, did you ever ask for their autograph or anything like that?
No, you're not allowed. So when you're a sportscaster, there's there are two written rules you cannot do. One is you can't cheer. So if you're covering a game, you can't all of a sudden clap, for your team.
Wow.
So you learn that you have to be a professional, no clapping. The second thing you learn is you don't ask for autographs. You are there as a professional and as a reporter. And if you want an autograph, that's what fans do. You're not a fan, you're a reporter. So you learn those two things very early on, that you have to be a professional. And so you cannot cheer and you cannot ask for autographs.
Wow. That I did not know. I'm thinking maybe news reporters, get this great opportunity to meet these great players and, they can, take a picture or get an autograph.
So when I was a sportscaster, we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have video cameras on the cell phones. If we did back then, if you're in a private thing with someone, they might let you take a picture.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's more acceptable, believe it or not, than asking for an autograph.
Yeah.
But when I was a sportscaster, we did not have cell phones with cameras.
Yeah.
So I really didn't have that opportunity.
Wow, but you did meet amazing players. I'm pretty sure you're so great.
Yeah.
You're happy for that.
And it's not like there's this thought process that people think, well, you interviewed Michael Jordan, so that means he invited you over to his house. No, that never happens. Yeah. No professional athlete has ever invited me to his house. We didn't hang out or anything like that.
Yeah.
Would some of them recognize me? Sure, they would recognize me. Not
all of them. You're not a friend. You're doing a job.
Exactly.
There. You're not meeting him to hang out or, to just chit chat.
Exactly. But it was a fun ride. You're covering sports at the end of the day, and that was fun.
It sounds so amazing, meeting these great players. What inspired you to become a news sportscaster?
When I was a little kid, for as far back as I can remember, I loved sports. But I was also a bad athlete. I was not, some great athlete. So I never thought about becoming a professional athlete because I just wasn't good.
Yeah.
But I loved sports. I knew I wanted to do something with sports, and I was a good talker. I could talk. I got most talkative everywhere I've gone in school. And so I was like, well, I would watch sportscasters at my local TV stations and say, why not me? Now, back when I wanted to do it, there was only 3 TV stations. There was no ESPN, there was no Fox, there was no 800 channels. There were 3 stations, CBS, ABC, NBC. So when I wanted to do it, my parents were like, you can't do that. And I would say, why not? And anytime they doubted me, that just fueled my fire, okay?
Yeah.
So it's all I ever wanted to be. It was my singular focus in school. My whole purpose, I felt, for going to middle school, for going to high school, for going to college, was to be a sportscaster.
That's amazing. So currently you're a teacher here. Mm-hmm. After 30 years, what inspired you to become a teacher here?
Really, it was luck. So what ended up happening was in 2009, myself and about 100 other people got laid off in the Washington, D.C. market. It was the recession back then. And so I was trying to get back into TV, but I couldn't get back there on a full-time basis. So I took a freelancing job with the All Sports Network, and that could pay the bills for a while, but freelancing pays a fraction of what a full-time job does.
Not even a part-time job. It's like just whenever.
Exactly. And so I could only do that for so long, and I was looking for the next career, and I was like, it's really tough to replace being a sportscaster if that's all you've ever wanted to do. So I actually tried sales for a year or two, and I was decent at it, but I was like, it just wasn't the same. It wasn't me. And so my son actually said to me, he goes, Dad, why don't you be a substitute teacher? He goes, at least it'll occupy your time, no pressure.
Yeah.
And when I became a substitute teacher, I didn't realize all these high schools had TV programs.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what I could teach these kids. And sure enough, the first full-time opening, was at my old high school, of all places, Atlantic City High School. And so it's been better than I ever could have dreamed, because here's the one thing I didn't realize as a teacher. I knew I would give my knowledge to kids. I never realized the impact they would make on me. I didn't realize how much, I wake up every day looking forward to seeing them. And when they graduate, how sad I am when they graduate, because I won't be a part of their lives. And sure, I have other students come in, but then they leave too. Yeah. And I just didn't realize the rush I got from TV, the red light, the broadcasting, my students give me now. And I never expected that. So I'm very fortunate to have a job that gives me the same rush that TV gave me.
That's amazing. So here at Atlantic City High School, pretty much you started this TV class. Pretty much they had it before, right?
They had it before. Okay. They had other teachers here before, but I don't think, when I was at Atlantic City High School, we did these newscasts before, and they were very primitive back then, but you remember, we're talking about 1980. And then when I came here, they were not doing newscasts. And when I saw the studio, it was an absolute wreck. And I'm like, if you're not doing newscasts and your studio's a wreck, what are you doing in this class?
Yeah.
And so my vision was I played to my strengths, what I knew, what I did for 30 years. I did it at a pretty high level. And then I also took a little bit of what I did when I was in high school and how meaningful that was. And I combined those two. And so I had a vision of what I wanted this program to be and what we wanted to do.
Wow. So after you came here, things changed. You changed everything, and now it's going amazing.
Oh, yeah.
So I've checked your newscast and everything. The name is amazing, ACHS Viking News. Did you come up with that name?
I did, and it's a very simple name. It's Viking News, but I I didn't want to get too fancy with it. I wanted people to know what it was. If I came up with some fancy name, I didn't want someone to say, what is that?
Yeah.
If I say Viking News, you know what that is. It's news it's news we do. And so I just thought it was just very simple, but it got the message across.
That's great. So recently you had your 40th newscast this past month in April. How do you feel about that? I mean, that's amazing. 40 newscasts for 40 months. That's a big thing.
Well, it started off a little bit differently. So I remember when we got the studios back in 2019, it was like in April, our administration said, we need a newscast. I'm like, we need a newscast? I'm just learning this equipment, because when you're in TV and you're an anchor, especially at a high market, you're not allowed to touch the equipment. It's all union. So I had to learn the equipment, everything. I was like, doing newscasts? We're not ready to do a newscast. So we threw something.
Yeah, you weren't behind the scenes person. You were on camera. You needed time to learn.
To learn the technical stuff. And whatever we threw together, I don't think was very good, but they wanted it, so we did that. And then, so we never started off doing one per month. You know, maybe one year we did 4 newscasts, and the next year 5 newscasts. Wow. And as I grew with the position and got better and knew what we wanted to do, we could do more and more newscasts, to the point that we were doing one every single month. Now, COVID interrupted a lot of things too. 40 newscasts in 5 or 6 years doesn't really sound a lot. That only averages out to about 6 a month. Remember, we lost COVID for a full year, and the year after that, we had kids coming in with masks and only 5 kids. So we got interrupted by a lot. So you take that plus the learning, but now it's running exactly the way I had envisioned it from the start.
That's great to hear, because if you're not enjoying it, you know, then the students won't enjoy it. But if you're liking it, they will definitely like it. What's your favorite part about running the school's newscast?
I think it's just seeing the way the students perform. I enjoy doing stories that I think everyone will really enjoy. I get a charge if a student says to me, I remember one student, Sam Pereira, who said to me her senior year, Mr. Toland, for the first 3 years I thought I wanted to be a nurse, but I decided I wanted to be a sportscaster.
Wow, that's a big change.
And you say to yourself, with students, you don't know if you make an impact. That's one I knew I made an impact, you know, because she changed careers. So so all those things, they're all rewarding. They all give me a little bit, but the best part is just seeing my students every day. Seeing my students, that's what gives me a rush. It's so funny, because a lot of teachers will say, are you happy you're coming to the end of a school year? And I'll be like, maybe for a week or two, and I'll miss my students. I want to see my students every day.
Have you had any of your previous students visit you or call you or anything like that?
Absolutely. So I still keep in touch very much so with Charlie Vicario, who's now, she's just completed her junior year at Arizona State. Maddie Chapman, who just completed her junior year at DePaul University in Chicago. Both of these students, you know, got into the field. Charlie keeps in touch with me all the time. She's doing amazing things at Arizona State. Maddie's doing amazing things at DePaul. It's more likely that I will stay in touch with students in one of 2 ways. Either one, because they got into the TV business and they still need my help, they need my advice, and that's a great feeling, because that's really what I'm here for. I remember Charlie had an interview. She was competing against like 15 or 20 other kids, and only one person got the job, and she needed advice on an interview. And I said, Charlie, call me. I said, I excel in interviews. I'll tell you exactly what to do. Long story short, she got the job. So that was thrilling. The other way I'll keep in touch with a student a lot is if they live in Ventnor. If they live in Ventnor, I live in Ventnor, so there's more likelihood I'm going to see them. But a lot of students you just lose touch with, and for me that's sad, but it's the evolution of life.
Yeah. How do you prepare each class to take on a newscast every single month?
The good thing is, after doing this for a while, I kind of have an idea of some stories that are coming up. Like, some stories are always repetitive. For example, Christmas, we're always going to do Christmas stories. So you might think to yourself, well, that's the same story. That's nothing new. But that's exactly what TV stations around the country do. When it's Thanksgiving, they're doing Thanksgiving stories. When it's Christmas, they're doing Christmas stories. Now, there are some stories you don't repeat. Like, we did a story on how one of our star football players, Ice Cup, how the impact of him helped his teammates get noticed. We can't do that story again because Ice Cup's gone, you know? So there are some stories that can only be run, you get one shot to do them. And there's other stories that you can repeat on a yearly basis. So sometimes the key is really trying to come up with new ideas and keeping my ears open, keeping my eyes open for a new story idea. So that's usually part of it.
So does your first year students, did they also get to learn how to record everything inside the studio, or?
My first year students never go in studio.
Okay.
Never do, because TV one is more of a proving ground. I need to know, first off, are you mature enough?
True.
Because that's expensive equipment. You break a $20,000 camera, I'm sorry, he's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's different if it's a $300 camera, not a $20,000 camera. So I need to make sure that every student who goes in there is responsible enough. But I don't know that till I see them in TV1. And I can't just handpick and say, okay, you students can go in the studio and you can't. I have to make a rule across the board. You don't go into TV2 unless, I feel you've hit the certain criteria in TV1.
That's good, because the first year students, you don't know them. They're just coming in, they're new.
Right.
But then when they get into the rest of the class, TV2, 3, and 4, now you know them. That's why you miss them in the future.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
How do you help once they get into their second year? How do you help them prepare for the studio and give them advanced tasks? What I mean by that is like anchoring. Not many students can anchor. Mm-hmm. They feel nervous or shy, but they want to do it. Or some may not. How do you prepare them and get them in that field?
So in TV2, they will learn every single role in the studio. Okay. And one of those is anchoring. So let's say they don't want to anchor. I tell them, when we're practicing as a class, no one's recording anything, no one cares, you're going to try it. Yeah. Because anchoring is like a cafe line of a bunch of food.
Yeah.
And you see a bunch of food you've never tried before. Some you'll like, some you won't. But you don't know if you like it until you try it. So you're going to try anchoring. Now, after practicing anchoring in front of your classmates, if you still don't like it, I'm not going to force you to anchor.
Yeah.
But you're going to try it. And I can't tell you how many students who were so nervous, who swear they didn't want to anchor, try it and they go, oh, wow, Mr. Toland, I like this. And that's all they want to do.
Yeah.
So I've learned from past experience, you get them to try it and then make a decision from there.
What's the main thing that you want your students to leave from your class and they have mastered it or learned it? Like in TV, like, shooting a video or script writing, what do you think is the most important role?
I think the most important role is to be able to tell a story. To be able to recognize a story and tell a good story.
Okay.
And I think if they can do that, that's going to help them in so many areas, not just the TV business. Let's say they're going into real estate and they're going to sell a home. They want to tell the story about that home and what makes it special, so clients want to buy that home. Let's say they're in public relations, they're working for a casino, and they need to promote a certain event or something at the casino. How are you going to tell the story of that casino or that event that's going to attract people into your casino?
Right.
So if you could tell a story or know even what it takes to tell a story. I'm not saying you're going to do it at my level, but you know the ingredients, you know the foundation. To me, that's the best skill you can have.
Can you give me a quick rundown of how monthly ACHS newscast is done from start to finish? How do you start it, and then how do you, the last step, of course, is recording it. Right. How do you begin it?
So for me, it always starts with the stories and the story ideas. What are we doing this month? What's coming up this month? I have to make sure, I don't want to have a newscast where there's just 3 stories, okay? So I always start with the stories. How are we going to formulate those stories? Second thing is to ask students do they want to do any of these stories, and have them volunteer. Students are going to be more enthusiastic doing a story they want to do versus one you tell them to do. Yeah. And if some students don't want to do it, there will be someone who always volunteers for a story. There's always something for a student to like. So we start with that. We assign the certain roles. The roles never change. We're always going to need 2 anchors. We're always going to need a reporter, a director, technical director. We have students volunteer for that, and they know if they don't volunteer for this one, they're going to do the next one. Yeah. So everyone's going to do something. So it all kind of starts with that. The first 2 weeks, we're working on those stories, getting those stories done, because you have no newscast without stories. Yeah. So we spend the first 2 weeks getting the stories done. The third week is generally for rehearsals. And then by the end of the third week, we want to record, because we need that weekend for our principal to approve it so we can run it and show the staff the final week of the month.
That's a great process of making a newscast. What's one part of this newscast, or in general as a news reporter, that is a behind the scene thing, but not most people know about it. So there might be, people might know there's a director, there's somebody that's running it, but what is one role you think that people don't know that TV news has?
Well, sometimes they don't know why an anchor can always be looking at the camera without looking down at a piece of paper. And the reason is because the words are in the camera. And the reason the words are in the camera is because there is a thing called a teleprompter, where someone behind the scenes is rolling the prompter, they're rolling the words, and anchors can see the words in their camera. So they're looking straight ahead at the camera and they can see their words.
You have that here?
We do have that here.
Oh, wow.
I would not teach this class any other way.
Yeah.
I will not have my students going up and down like this, like it's a third grade book report.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not professional, all right? I want to make sure that my kids take pride in what they're doing. And one of my mottos to them is, we do it like the pros do it. We're not here to do it any other way but the way the pros do it. Why would they want to learn it any other way? So I won't have them do a newscast unless they have a teleprompter. And so for the normal viewer out there, maybe they wonder, gee, how come that person can always stare at the camera and never look down at the script? Because the words are in the camera, that's why.
Why do they have paper still? If everything's inside the teleprompter, why do they have paper in front of them still?
So remember, most television is live TV. What if that teleprompter goes down? If the teleprompter goes down, they have a script. What if the teleprompter is going faster than the anchor needs it to go, or slower than the anchor is going, or they're on the wrong page?
Yeah.
If an anchor is following along with their script at the same time, they can still do it without missing a beat. They might have to look down once or twice.
Yeah.
But remember, this is live TV. It's not recorded.
Yeah.
What they say goes. There's no redos like we do in high school. We do it on tape because we want our kids to look the best they can be.
Yeah.
They're putting their face out there. We want them to look good. So we record it. But in professional TV, it's live. So if that prompter goes down, the anchor can still read by following along in the script.
I didn't know that, because I thought, they don't look at the paper, but why is there a paper if they're looking straight ahead?
That's exactly the reason why, because if something goes, like, again, the prompter can go slower than they want, it could go faster than they want, it could be on the wrong page.
Yeah.
Anything can happen with
they
that
don't control it.
You realize as a professional, you don't depend 100% on the teleprompter. You got to follow along.
Have you ever had a newscast mess up, or you had to cancel one because of, technical issues, or a student didn't show up, anything like that?
As a teacher or as a professional?
As a teacher.
As a teacher, no, we've hit every single one. Wow. Every single one. I tell my anchors all the time, I need you. You're the ones who have rehearsed. Yeah. I need you. The technical crew, if someone doesn't show up, that's why we teach kids every single role.
Yeah.
So if one kid doesn't show up, I can pull another kid and he can do that role, or she can do that role.
Not everyone can do anchoring, but the others can do behind the scenes.
And a lot of kids can do anchorings, but if we're ready to record and that student hasn't seen that script yet because they weren't the ones rehearsing, then that makes it more difficult. I don't want to throw a student where they're not going to look good. So, I ask my students when they want to anchor, are you sure you're going to be here these days? Because if you think you might not, don't volunteer to anchor.
Wow. Now, I wouldn't say in all 8 years, because it's hard to go back all 8 years, but either most recent one, what's the best story idea a student may have given you? A
story has given me. I know probably the best story we did, but it was one I came up with, which was a tragic situation, was that one of our vice principals, her husband died at a very young age. And so she allowed us to do the story, and Joe Lyons did the story where he interviewed her and she talked about how emotional it was to lose her husband. That's one that stands out from that. From that type of story. There's also been very lighthearted stories that stand out. I remember Zakiya Watson did a story on what goes into braiding a girl's hair and how long you have to sit in the chair and what it takes to clean braided hair. Now, for an African-American girl, they may understand it. For a guy like me, I had no clue. I thought it was an amazing story. I thought the story we did on how Ice Cup's success, he was our star football player, has benefited other students, and how they could possibly get a scholarship because of his success. I thought that was a great story. We did one recently where John Taylor did a story on tattoos that students have and the meaning behind those tattoos. That was an awesome story. So, my kids amaze me. They come up with great stories. So we've done quite a few. I've been super proud of.
That's good. Because that story, I also watched that. That was pretty amazingly done, and it was pretty emotional as well. Now, do you think, did you ever thought about that if I were to do this story, that the vice principal would, feel uncomfortable or may not want to do it? Does that thought come to your mind?
Sure, and that's why I didn't count on the story till I asked her permission.
Okay.
When I think of an idea, in all my years of TV, I'm not afraid to ask a question. I'm not afraid to do something. So, all you do is ask them. If they say no, they say no. So, I didn't expect a student to ask the vice principal on this. I had to do this, and sometimes I have to do it. And so I went up to her and I said, you're back here. I'm sure you're coping. You're trying to get through.
Yeah.
Would you mind if one of our students did a story on that? And you tread lightly, in those situations. This is bigger than Viking news. This is about a dear person losing her husband. So you tread lightly with it, but you ask their permission. If she had said no, we wouldn't have done the story.
Yeah. As a professional sportscaster, if you could bring back one of your story or talk about it with your students that you covered in your professional field, what story would that be if you could remember it?
Well, there's two that stand out in my mind, and they both won awards. One won the AP Sports Story of the Year in Pennsylvania, and that was the story about All-Pro linebacker LaVon Kirkland writing a letter to God before every game. Not praying, he wrote a letter to God. I'd never heard that in my entire life.
Me neither.
Your best stories professionally are ones you've never thought of in your entire life. Like you'd never heard of the stories. I've done this for 30 years. I've seen every single story there is. I never had a story like that. And we did it. I had a photographer, Paul Ruggiero, who was really good. I remember we started off the story by saying, the post office delivers millions of letters every day from destinations near and far, but there's one letter this place will never see. And LaVon's like, dear, and before we even said God, we mic'd him up and we asked him to recite the words as he was writing them. Yeah. And before we said God, said, before every game, Steelers linebacker LaVon Kirkland writes a letter, it's not to his family or to his friends, it's to a higher source. And then he would continue, dear God, thank you for all your many blessings. And so that stands out to me because I thought it was the best story I ever did. It's also the story I believe that got me the job in Washington, D.C. If you can tell a great story, that's how you get jobs. And so I know I told that really well, and I knew I was going to get a better job after doing that story. So that story stands out. The other story is the one that won me my only Emmy Award, which was a story on a guy who ran backwards every day 10 miles. But he ran backwards through the city of Washington, D.C. His name was Cedric Givens. And I originally wasn't going to submit it for an Emmy, but my editor, Joe Hansard, loved it. He goes, Greg, you should submit it. I think it's going to win. And I did, and it won. So those are the two stories that stand out the most, ones that won me pretty nice awards.
So what's your favorite memory so far from running this TV production class?
What's my singular greatest memory? Wow. That is tough because I feel like
now you did
every
say
year
students, but every year
right to narrow it down to one memory. I would probably say I don't know if there's a singular event as much as a singular student, and I'm going to go back to Charlie Vicario. Because when I first started out in TV, I didn't know who would be good.
Yeah.
And Charlie was the first student, her very first project she did. I said, whoa, wow, I got a star. And I've had many superstars in my 8 years of teaching.
Yeah.
But she was the first. She was the first person whose talent I recognized. And now she just completed her junior year at Arizona State University, one of the top broadcasting schools in the country. I probably have had more impact on her than anyone else. She wrote a letter to me after her senior year, or as she was graduating, about the impact I had made on her life. The fact that she still calls me for advice.
Yeah.
And as years have gone on, she's needed less and less advice because she's meeting more professionals and she's meeting at a different level, and I get that.
Yeah.
But along the way, like when she needed that interview advice, I gave it to her and she got it. And I think if it's hard to pinpoint a memory, like one memory, but I think if I had to, I guess the impact I made on Charlie, and she's still doing it. She's still broadcasting. Yeah. This is still what she wants to do. And her mom texts me all the time, "You did this."
That's amazing.
Yeah, overwhelming. That is, you did this.
A parent saying that.
Yes.
Recognition for a teacher from a parent is the most important thing that you would get from a student.
So I would say, just the impact I've had on Charlie. But the thing is, I tell my students all the time, tell myself this: if I either say something or do something that gives you something that helps you later in life, whether it's, again, something I might have said, not something I did or whatever, that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
The one thing I try to tell all of my students, I say, if you don't remember anything I've ever taught you or anything I've ever said, let me leave you with the most important piece of advice I ever got that I can give you. Remember, in life, it only takes one yes. Think about that. That was the best advice I ever got.
That is the best advice.
So I don't care if you're going for a job. I don't care if you're dating girls. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
No matter how much rejection you get, rejection sucks.
It does, yes.
Okay, and it can get you down.
Yeah.
Remember, it only takes one yes. And that's the thing that got me through 12 years of South Carolina, when I was down and I didn't think I could get out of a small market because I didn't think I was good enough. That was the one piece of advice, because I was an intern in Washington, D.C., and it was a weekend sportscaster, Lee Zeidman, who told me that. He goes, "Great, remember, with all the rejections you get, it only takes one yes." And that's a piece of advice. That's what I always want to leave my students with.
Well, I was going to ask you the last question. We were down to an advice question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what advice would you give to a student thinking about joining your class and then later on getting into the news field?
Well, getting into the news field, I could say, is like acting. It's like being a professional singer, professional comedian. It's entertainment.
Yeah.
It's hard. If you love what you do, it's a rush. And I loved what I did. And I didn't think anything could ever replace it. It's my identity. It's who I am. I tell my students all the time, I don't look at myself as a teacher. I'm a sportscaster who teaches TV.
Yeah.
Because I could do this for another 7 years. That would put me at 70 years old. And that's still half the time I was as a sportscaster, 15 years compared to 30. So if you want to get in this business, just know you got to work hard. You got to really love it. But if you do it and you love it, it is such a rush and is so fulfilling. As far as in life, just what I said before, that it only takes one yes. And that goes for TV or not TV. It's the greatest piece of advice. It's one I've always kept, in the back of my mind all my life, to the point that I never forget it. It's the greatest thing someone could have ever said to me.
Yeah.
It's helped me through so much. And I hope that it helps my students as well after they graduate.
That is an amazing piece of advice. I really appreciate your time, Mr. Toland, you gave me today. During your prep period, I believe this is?
It is.
Yes, so I really appreciate it. This was an amazing day. It's an amazing, time to speak to you. So that'll be it for today's episode, everyone. This was an amazing talk, and, I learned a lot, and I'm sure you did as well. We have amazing teachers scheduled as well for coming up episodes, so make sure to check it out. And that'll be it. Stay tuned, stay curious, and enjoy your day.